Welcome back to the podcast, Billy Jaz, mate. Welcome back to Biz and Buying. We'll crack this if
Thank
you're
you, mate.
keen
Nice
for a beer. I know I am.
I am.
Sometimes
Nice and
I do
cold
these
too,
at
mate.
like 9 o'clock in the morning. Having a beer at 9 o'clock in the morning is probably not ideal, but
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me on.
my pleasure. Good to have you back. And
Good
for
to be back.
yeah, and for anyone that's listening that wants to go back through and listen to our previous episode, obviously we broke down a little bit about your career and how you got into real estate. And I think for any particularly any first home buyers out there, people that want to like start the property journey, I thought it was perfect. You kind of went through your story of how you got your first place, borrowed a little bit of money, sold that, got into the next property, sold that. So I think anyone you talk to in real estate, that's usually how it starts out. Buy a property, get a bit of equity, buy a property again, get some more equity, sell, and kind of build your way up. How's everything going for you in terms of, I think last time we were talking, maybe you're looking into buying another development potentially or a potential development, doing a splitter or?
Yeah, I have done well out of that in the past, and I think I've gone through a very typical buyer journey where you tend to 1 minute you're in, 1 minute you're out, you know. And at the moment, everything got me to where we are now to build our dream home.
Yeah.
And we're there, and we're in this really really nice, comfortable space of contentedness. You know, like life's good, we've got the house and all that, and we don't necessarily need another investment property.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, it's like saying, well, you do, man. Like you got to, if you think ahead 10, 20 years, what does that mean for you, for the kids and all that? You know, like I don't want, like so many clients that I see, the whole life, the whole financial infrastructure is tied up in their house. I don't want to be that guy. So although I keep oscillating in and out of wanting to buy a property, not wanting to buy another investment, do it on development, don't do it, I know I need to do something to future-proof myself and my family. So 2 weeks ago, I was like, no, we're cool, calm, contented. And this week, I'm like, yeah, back on the hunt. You know, where can I? And I guess at the moment, I'm convinced right now is a really, really good time to buy. And I've been in this situation so many times where I see other buyers buying at good times. And I think to myself, I saw that happening. Why didn't I action that? Like I'm out there at the coalface, seeing other good deals happening, and I'm just watching them go by. You know.
You know, it's funny. Like I'm in a very similar spot at the moment as well. Like even with a lot of first home buyers, those sorts of things. I'm saying, guys, now's. I know you might think I'm just saying this, but now is actually a really good time to buy, just because we can potentially see what's coming. You know, there's talks about the Olympics. The migration's still huge. Interest rates look like they're going to continue to come down. And all that's going to do is going to spark more and more interest within the market. We're also seeing people, well, myself in particular, seeing a lot of people go, you know what, I'm getting out of the share market. There's obviously a lot of volatility there at the moment as well with Trump, the tariffs, all that kind of stuff. So I'm seeing a lot of people go, you know what, I want to invest that money into property. So I think it's just quite a bit of a crazy time, or what will turn into more of a crazy time, I think, to be able to get into the market, particularly in a location like the Gold Coast. So, mate, it's really interesting spot to be in right now. And so, how are you finding it right now in terms of listings, buyer activity? What are you kind of noticing in particular? And for anyone that's listening that hasn't or doesn't know who Billy Jaz is, you just want to actually first rattle off kind of those main areas that you and the team are looking after?
Yeah. So personally, I look after primarily Elanora Currumbin Waters in a price range of 900 to 1.67 million. That's most of our business. We do a little bit below, a little bit above. The office in general covers from 1 to 4 million between Palm Beach, Elanora Currumbin Waters primarily, and a few areas. But that's ultimately our little hub. Right, so we've got a really good grasp of what's happening in that market, and I guess leading up to now, this year's been weird, right? There's a lot that's happened. Understandably weird, I should say. We had the first rate cut, which was heavily anticipated, and anticipation creates a handbrake effect in the market every single time, right? So first rate cut. We had Trump We had the tariff wars.
Mm-hmm.
We had a cyclone.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about that.
Then we had an election.
Yep.
Right. And there was anticipation of even the cyclone. The cyclone was coming. So the anticipation started a week and a half in advance, right? So there's been a huge handbrake effect across so many reasons. And now I feel like we're on the back end of that. And the moving forward, we're kind of only looking to, we have stability local. We know Labor government's still in. Tariffs, there's new sort of agreements with tariffs, which are a little bit more like the original ones, a little bit closer to. Post-cyclone insurance claims, they're all sort of coming to a head. There's been, again, a lot of people waiting.
Yep.
And, I think now we're going to go into just the usual tax time, people wanting to get their finance reapproved and all of that. But the second half of the year, I think, looks incredibly optimistic because we have certainty, we have less instability locally, nationally and globally, and the prospects are that it's very likely we're going to have more rate cuts.
Yeah.
So if I was a buyer, which I kind of am, I'm convinced now is a really good time to buy because I'm persuaded that spring this year is not going to be, there won't be anything weird about it. I think it'll be a spring selling and listing season. Unarguably there'll be a backlog of listings and sales that didn't happen from January to May. Sellers that are, getting their house ready or damaged from the cyclone and all that, that's going to come in spring. So if you're looking, one, you might feel tempted to wait to see what else comes up.
Yeah.
But I think if you're looking for a good opportunity, properties that are on the market now and that will come on over the June, July winter period, I think there's still going to be some good deals to be had. Yeah.
And what are you kind of noticing at the moment from a listing perspective? Are you finding that you guys are, and traditionally, like from a tracking sense, do you feel like there's a lot coming onto the market at the moment, or you feel like it's going through a bit of a lull period, or?
I think there's been a bit of a lull period all year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So typically January, February are really strong listing and selling months every year.
Yep.
It didn't happen this year.
Yeah.
Which was weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel there's a backlog still to come to the market. It's also been weird that we had a really big April, quieter first quarter and then a really big April. Also, when you look back at our charts over the last 10 years, that doesn't really happen. So I think whatever's frozen the market a little bit the first half of the year, I think is going to be released and is going to start unfolding in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you finding with the open homes that you are having that obviously I think maybe if we were talking 12 months ago, maybe there wasn't as many people at open homes. Are you finding that that's ramping right back up again, buyer activity?
Yes, in certain price ranges.
Okay.
So anything under 1.2 is very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you were to segment the market, like there's markets and then there's micro markets, and I think 1.2 and below has been a hot market for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And for that first home buyer, I think it's only going to get hotter. Labor government's incentives with the the deposit scheme they got going.
It's gone up to $1 million. Yeah. Right. So
okay.
Yep.
So anything under $1 million is basically walking out the door, and I think will actually become harder and will be a faster moving market. I find that the gap is probably between 1.5 and about 3.5, I think is the most affected market, most affected by, again, local, national, global uncertainties, but primarily interest rates. I'd say, and you'd probably know this better than anyone, but my opinion is that between 1.5 to 3.5 is perhaps the most leveraged market.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, people like myself, buying property, good incomes, making the most of it, knowing that you're in your prime. So you're like, I might not get this capacity to borrow ever again in my life. So as a result, I'm going to buy 1, 2, 3, 4 properties, and then you become really leveraged, right?
Yeah.
And for so many people that did that when interest rates were between 2 to 3%, are mostly affected by the interest rates that have gone up to now, or 6.5, now around 6.
Yeah.
So I feel like that market has been the slower market. I feel like those sellers are the sellers that have had to have price adjustments in order to get deals done. And then I don't dabble too much in it, but that $5 million plus market is just, well, they're not concerned by interest rates.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a thing. They're buying lifestyles, and Gold Coast continues to provide that lifestyle, that luxury.
Yep.
And I see those two markets just continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But I do anticipate as interest rates come down, we're going to start seeing the consistency in the 1.5 to 3.5 market again.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Interesting. And obviously you're a bit on the fence at the moment, but if you were going to go and buy something, once again, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think last time we were talking, you were saying something like you'd find something that maybe you could redevelop, chuck maybe a duplex on or something like that. Like if Billy Jaz was going out to go and buy something at the moment, what do you think you'd be aiming for? And would you still be sitting somewhere down on the southern part of the Gold Coast, or is there any particular suburbs or regions that you might look into? Or
I guess what's tempting to me is a duplex site. We actually bid on one probably about 3 months ago, and
had an existing house on it at the time.
Yeah, it had an old house. It would have been we would have been able to put 3 on it.
Has it already had the DA on it, or
no?
But
it was like a 900 square meter block, corner section. Got the town planner to look at it. He said we definitely get a duplex on it, then a freestanding one. So anyway,
should we break that down really quickly?
Yeah.
So so that just comes down to the due diligence, right? You've found a property, you've gone, cool, all right, this one looks like it could be really good. You then liaise with the town planner and go, hey, this is kind of what I got. What can I do here?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I wanted a corner position. I was tempted by the land size for the area. It was a lot bigger, huge frontage on one side of the street. So then I thought, okay, you could have 2 driveways on this side with the third one on the other side. Ran it past the town planner. He gave me a little sketch. He said, this is what you'd be able to do on it. I looked at that market. This was in Currumbin Waters.
Yep.
I looked at that market and I thought, okay, this is different to what I've done in Palm Beach in the past. It's a mid-spec build. So I wasn't planning to do anything seriously luxurious in that little pocket.
Yep.
But I thought, I know a safe strategy to do the development, get in and out, and move on and position me for the next one based on doing a mid-spec build and what it would cost.
Yeah.
But when we were bidding for it, I said to myself, I want to be that buyer that gets a good deal. You know what I mean? Like I speak to so many buyers after an auction and they go, oh, no, we ended up buying this one. And I'm like, how much did you pay for it? They go, oh, we paid 1.2. I'm like, that thing was worth 1.3 every day of the week. And they go, yeah, there was no one else at the auction. So we negotiated and we got it. And I thought, I'm going into this with the intention of, I want to be that guy. I wasn't that guy, right? I was outbid. We had a max. I think we were prepared to pay 1.25. I think it went for 133-ish, thereabouts, which I think was still fair and money to be made there, right?
Yep.
But yeah, that was only 3 months ago. And then since then, I've kind of pulled back and withdrawn. And now I'm like, okay, I'm back in and that's something that's tempting again.
Yep. Have you kept your eye on that block? You think they're going to do something similar to it?
They'll definitely develop
Okay, yeah.
It was all investors that were interested in it.
And so that's an interesting one. And anyone that knows the southern part of the Gold Coast, like obviously we've seen a lot of the duplex stuff happen, particularly in the likes of Palmy, right? Currumbin Waters, would you say kind of not as much? Do you think that's going to start to? Yeah. Do you think that's going to start?
I would have been pioneering a little bit, as these people would have.
Yeah.
But it was there wasn't enough precedence in the area for me to say, yes, I will pay fair market value at 133 or whatever it was. If there was precedence in the area and someone else had done something similar, I probably would have paid that.
Yeah.
But because I knew an element of this is me pioneering in that space and that area, I thought, no, I need to buy it at X amount of dollars to make me feel comfortable to be the pioneer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But in Palm Beach, for example, like you want a duplex block on a 500 square meter section, South Palmy, where I live, it's worth 1.7 to 1.8. You can't argue that. It is what it is. But the case studies are there to validate the end result.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I think in that area of Currumbin Waters, I was like, I don't have the case studies. So I'm either getting it for a deal or I'm not going to commit to it.
Yeah. It's going to be a really interesting one, actually, like looking at obviously what's transpired in Palmy. And I know that they are different suburbs, but, you know, they're essentially side by side, right? Palmy and Currumbin Waters. So it'll be really interesting to see what sort of effect, like let's say they do that one, I wonder if they do start popping up more and more regularly, right?
It'll become a thing.
Yeah.
You know, like looking back, I think of people have been renovating forever in the area.
Yeah.
But you know, when I started almost 11 years ago, over 11 years ago, and I remember people renovating in Palmy, and then it hit this point where like Palmy renovations just went next level. Same with the builds. You know what I mean? It was almost like we were in this era of low to mid spec builds and renos, and then all of a sudden it just went high spec.
High spec, yeah.
And that the market was demanding that.
Yeah.
We're now seeing that in Elanora and Currumbin Waters. Not necessarily with the new builds yet, but with the renos, like it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm me and Sim are actually in Currumbin Waters, and I'm noticing just more and more how many renos are going on just in our street alone. Like it's actually insane.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I just find the Gold Coast is just such an interesting spot. Hey, like I was even talking to Matt on a podcast the other day, and we were just talking through like how interesting it is. Like within a 5-minute drive, you can either be on the beach, you could be in a high-rise apartment, you could be in a luxurious property on the beach, you could be on a canal, you could be on acreage. So I just find it like really interesting, particularly, and you'd know better than anybody with those areas that you're looking after, the kind of Palmy, Currumbin Waters and Elanora, they kind of cover off on all those things, don't they? So it's an interesting market. What are you finding at the moment in terms of from a sales position standpoint? So like what kind of market you're kind of leaning towards there? Because I'm from what I'm hearing, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, there's less and less auctions happening down here now.
Yeah.
What do you reckon there's a driver behind why that is the way it is, like the sales campaigns?
Yeah, there's well, I looked at this only this morning, and unarguably the best information on auctions at the moment is Apollo Auctions, Justin Nicholson, his group, you know. So I get his weekly emails, and if you're not getting them, like they're great. But I see his clearance rates every single week, or their clearance rates, and they're always sort of, you know, hovering between 50 to maybe 68%. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go through the last quarter, and I averaged it out, and over the last 3 months, the average clearance rate has been 58%, and that I think is okay. I say okay after the COVID market, because prior to COVID, okay was 30% clearance rate on the Gold Coast, because the whole COVID brought the auction culture to Queensland. We never used to have much of an auction culture. So I think that's okay. But the 65 plus clearance rates, although there's been 2 out of the last 13 weeks, there's no consistency there. So there's unarguably been a shift away from auctions because more of them are passing in. And the patterns you see is more properties come on as expressions of interest, and that's ultimately agents changing strategy because the confidence of the auction has diminished. You know, because no one really wants to end up in a failed auction scenario. I think it's a really good grip on the market. I think it'll increase going into the end of the year. But still a good strategy, I think, either way.
What are you finding the majority, and obviously it might depend on and I know you've probably said this before, but it probably more depends on the seller and kind of what campaign they would like to go with. But is there any kind of main ones that you guys are leaning towards right now?
At the moment, I feel typically we've been quite focused in auctions. And even necessarily the process of an auction can benefit the buyer and the seller and the agent if handled correctly. But we're seeing we're more flexible now, because when you go into a living room and you're talking to a seller, 90% of those sellers don't want to go to auction. Right? And if they're getting the same information that we're getting, that 58% of them are selling, you know, and the rest aren't, trying to convince them to go down that path, it might not be the right thing. So we feel like we're a little bit more collaborative now with sellers, understanding their circumstances, their time frame, all of that. But it's ultimately just outlining to them, if we don't go down the auction path, this is what it could mean for you. If we did, this is what it could mean for you. So I guess I would say it just feels a little bit more collaborative in terms of choosing the right sale method. And when the market's hot again, You walk into the living room and you're like, unarguable, auction is the way to go for this reason, for this case study, for that and that. It's got to be the way to go. And they'll look at you and they'll say, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's not just you saying that. It's the market also validating that by having 70% clearance rates and 3-4 properties on their street that sold at auction. So you've got to factor all of that in before you walk in with an idea. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. How hard do you think you find, like, yeah, I guess this is probably the right question to ask. How hard do you find it at the moment with trying to get where a price of something is right now? I know obviously during COVID it was obviously very hard to predict, what something might sell for just because there was so much buzz, particularly down here. But how are you kind of finding it with the current market, trying to nail what you think something's going to potentially be going for?
Yeah. I guess in my market, I'd say it's easy to value properties because there's consistency and they're somewhat fairly similar, as opposed to trying to decide if a house is worth, a property is worth $5 or $7 million. Trying to decide whether it's 1.5 or 1.7 is easier to decipher.
Yeah.
But I've got it wrong quite a few times this year in both ways. I've appraised properties for 1.5 and sold them for 1.7. I've appraised properties for 1.6 and sold them for 1.5, which again takes me to, all I can say is that it's been a weird 5 months. I say weird, but it's been a mixed bag.
Yeah.
There's been the odd case study where a property will sell for big money. A seller see that, or the neighbouring sellers see that, and they hinge off that one. And I've had to remind them that you're making a decision based off one sale, but we're forgetting all the collective of sales. And when you look at the collective of them, you'll see that the market's probably not as high as you thought.
Because there's obviously circumstances that come with that, right? Like who bought the property? Were they desperate to get into that location at that point in time? Had they sold a property? Like I guess there's so many variables there, isn't it? Really. Actually, so speak of the auction stuff really, really quickly. Obviously, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, you're not only the head real estate agent at McGrath Palm Beach, you also do the auctioneering side of things as well. Yeah. What do you think you enjoy more out of doing those two jobs?
Good question. I guess there aren't many agent auctioneers, right?
Yep.
But because it could be perceived to be a bit of a conflict of interest, or you can't be a great agent if you're an auctioneer, or you can't be a great auctioneer if you're an agent. I totally disagree with all of that. I really don't, as an agent, I really don't feel comfortable handing over the most critical part of a negotiation to someone else that doesn't have an intimacy with the buyer, the seller, or the property.
Yeah.
Enough said, right?
Yeah.
You cannot argue with that. So my understanding of seller's situation, circumstances, the buyer's credibility and qualifying them, and the property itself, I'm all over it as an agent and auctioneer. I'm in the middle of it. I'm in total control. So whenever I've listed and sold a property and I've auctioned it, there is no greater feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not the auctioneer part of it. It's not the agent part of it. It's the fact that every single element of that was in my control. It wasn't a third party auctioneer coming in, doing the call, counting the bids, and most agents who employ a external auctioneer, there's no right or wrong here, right? And there's some brilliant auctioneers out there. But most agents who do that, unless they're incredibly highly skilled agents, what they'll do is their job is to get all the buyers at the auction and then hand it over to the auctioneer. And most of the time, it's actually the auctioneer that will take over the negotiation. Like if you end up, doesn't meet reserve price and you've got to do the back and forth. Whereas I think, wouldn't you want, if you're paying an agent, wouldn't you want that agent to have the skill set, the confidence, the nous, the commercial acumen to be able to handle that for you when you're going to be paying them 30, 40, 50 grand as opposed to them, well, anyone can get nice photography, open the doors, twice a week for 3 weeks, invite the auctioneer and put on the show and then sit back and watch the auctioneer do it and then take all the credit for it. I am all the credit for my listings and sales that are auctioned. So I love that.
I reckon, does that enable you to work the room a little bit better as well? Like, because obviously you've seen who's coming to the open home, how many times they've come to the open home. Obviously people still need to put the bids in and that kind of stuff. But do you feel like you potentially got a little bit of a better feel to run an auction than maybe someone that's just showing up?
Yeah, good question. So, a lot of competing agents with me, when they go into the living room, if they know that they're against me, they'll say, "Oh, well, Billy's he's a principal and he's an auctioneer, so he's got a lot going on, and if he's the auctioneer and the agent, he can't work the room, and this is how we do it, and all that, right?"
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. And the reality is, I don't work the room, so I can't stand next to the bidder and go, "Oi," give him a little nudge and say, "Let's put in another 5 or 10." I can't do that. But what everyone doesn't know is that I've already worked the environment before the auction. I have 100% confidence that my auctions run like clockwork because I know what's going to happen on the day. There's no hope. There's no what if. So when I have I think the most highest and the best value for my seller in an auction campaign is at a reserve meeting, where I'll say, this will be a couple of days before, and I'll say to them, this is what's going to happen. I've spoken with buyer 1. I've got a sense of where they're at price-wise. They're at X amount of dollars. I've already pre-framed them that they're going to be my opening bidder. I've got buyer 2 who's indicated a level at $300,000 less. So I don't want them opening any bidding.
Yeah.
And I've already pre-framed them that I won't be looking to you for your opening bid, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll have buyer 3 who's there but can't bid because they need finance approval. But I've already pre-framed my highest bidder that if you don't get me to the price I need to be, the buyer there that's not bidding has already confirmed that they will pay X amount of dollars. So if you don't buy it, it'll be under contract the moment you're walking out of the auction if it passes in.
Yep.
So on the day, I don't need to work a crowd because I've already pre-framed and I've set the auction up, and that's, to me, that it's like I'm like a conductor, right? But I've already orchestrated the environment before the day. It's not left to hope. Most agents will just wait for the auctioneer. Sorry, I feel like this is turned into a podcast about pitching for a listing here. But,
no, but it's good. It's good for I think one, it's good for people to understand how it works, and I can attest to. I've been to auctions where you've been the auctioneer, mate. I just feel like there's an element of there's a passion when you do it that I don't reckon I've seen with a lot of, and that's not to knock any particular auctioneers, but you just tell that you know the product. And man, I think you do a fantastic job when you do them, man. I feel like they're always exciting and always a few good jokes in there as well. So no, that's the stuff that people need to know.
Yeah.
So why don't we just touch on really quickly? So there's a reserve, right? Anyone that goes to auction, and anyone that's listening to this that's potentially thinking about going to auction, whenever they're going to go and buy the property, it's unconditional, right? So there's no finance clause. Your building and pest needs to be done beforehand. There's no more due diligence left or anything like that. It's pretty much like when you put your bid in, and you could probably word this a little bit better as you perfectly do whenever you do your auctions. But essentially, when you put your bid in, it's an unconditional offer. Mm-hmm. Everything goes well. It meets the reserve. The property gets bought. The contract gets signed. Mm-hmm. I thought it might be really handy to just take us back that what kind of happens in the event doesn't meet reserve. What's kind of the next steps behind the curtain, which pretty much is what happens. They go into a room and discuss. Just take us through kind of what that looks like.
As a buyer, my recommendation to a buyer is you want to be in the back room negotiating. That should be your goal.
Yeah.
Right? If you turn up to an auction and there's 30 people bidding for it, it'll likely go past the reserve and there won't be any back room, right? But I'd say that probably happens 10, 15% of the time. I'd say most auctions end up where a bidding starts at X amount of dollars, and then it falls short of, let's say, $200,000 of the reserve price, and then it comes to a pause. At that point, so let's lose some numbers here. Let's say the seller wants 1.5. The bidding started at 1 million, and it's now paused at 1.35. Okay?
Yep.
We can't sell the property. It hasn't met the reserve price, so we push pause on the auction. At that point, myself or the auctioneer and the agent will go have a chat to the seller to say, letting you know We're at 1.35. Obviously, we haven't reached 1.5. The highest bidder is here, still interested. Do we pass it in at this price, or would you like us to explore perhaps 1.45 with the highest bidder?
Yeah.
Right. A seller will give you a reserve price before the auction. 90% of the time, it's not their bottom price.
Yeah.
So we have to give them the opportunity to say, okay, Billy, we have discussed it. We would actually accept 1.45 if the buyer gets to that.
Yep.
So then we'll go to the highest bidder and we'll say, look, good news. You're in the box seat to buy it. You won't be buying it at 1.35. However, the property will be announced on the market if you can bid 1.45. 90% of the time, that buyer will go, nah, no way. I'm not paying an extra 100K. And then the response to that buyer would be, okay, can you get any closer to 1.45? Not saying you're buying it, but happy to run it past the seller and see what they want to do.
Yep.
And they'll go, oh, we'll go to 1.4, but that's us done. We go back to the seller, say they're at 1.4. What would you like to do? Then they might go, oh, 1.425. So basically the back room scenario, or when it pauses, it just turns into a normal private negotiation. You do the back and forth, you do the dance with the seller.
Yep.
And then you walk back out, and let's say you come to an agreement, they sign an adjusted reserve letter at 1.425. At that point, the auctioneer must announce it to the crowd, call it through 3 times for the event of any further bidding, and give everyone a chance to bid again.
Yep.
Okay. But to the audience, it seems like the highest bid was 1.35, and then there's like this back and forth, and then they come out and they go, okay, same bidder puts his hand up and goes 1.425, and the crowd goes, whoa, he just bid 75 grand against himself. But he didn't.
No. Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, he got our seller down 75 grand. He came up 75 grand. We did the dance. We met in the middle and got a deal done.
Yeah.
That's where most auctions are heading to. And to get into that, let's call it the backroom negotiation, you just got to be the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And I think to do that, you just got to be the one. My recommendations on that would be start the bidding and bid with confidence and just keep going, keep chipping away. You know, like there's lots of buyers agents that do it really well out there.
Yeah.
And let me make it very clear. Intimidation is definitely a strategy that works in an auction as a bidder. It's unarguable.
Yeah. I found that just with the ones that I've been to, the quick bids, going back really quickly, putting the onus back on somebody else to actually have to think about and make a decision. So that's what I always say to my clients: if you ever go into an auction, just try and bid as quickly as you can. You don't have to go up hundreds of thousands or 50 grand or anything like that at a time.
Yeah.
But just put the onus back on someone else to try and make the decision to go, well, okay, what are we going to go next?
Yeah.
So
I had one in Tweed maybe a year ago, and it was like 900 and something, and one bidder was bidding in 10s and then 15s, and they were sort of changing it up, and then the other bidder was just going 1 on top every single time, 1 on top, but they were really quick at it, right?
Yeah.
And then it'll be like 840, 841, 870, 871, 900, 901. And then the person bidding in 10s and 15s was taking their time to make the decision. And then at the very last bid, they said something like 930, and it goes 931. And then you could just see the underbidder just roll their eyes. The dad looks at him, and you get the body language go, nah, we're out. Anyway, we sell it. We walk upstairs to sign the contract, and the bidder is sweating, nervous, like panting. And I said to her, what's going on? She goes, that was literally my last $1,000 I had to bid. I said, you know what's really funny about that? The underbidder walked out. I went to congratulate him and say, well done on your efforts. And they said, look, they were just going to keep going. So we just thought, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they got completely intimidated out of it, not knowing that was literally their last $1,000.
Crazy. Yeah. I do. The more and more I've seen them, the more and more you get in a property. I just love the psychology around it. It's so interesting. So interesting. And that must be interesting for you to watch as an auctioneer as well. And you'd probably see it. You'd see, I think body language is massive, right? Like if you can be confident and once again go back quickly, I think people at some point in time, people just go, this isn't going to work. Like rightly they give up, right?
I actually, Matt Stram and I talk a lot about the psychology of bidding and all that. And I wasn't at his last one, but I was watching the live video.
Was that the one in Mermaid?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. And I actually said to him, I said, mate, I saw 2 key behaviors that I've seen in you in the past, right? I can tell he's really curious to know it, but I'm not going to tell him because when he comes to my auction, I don't want him knowing that I'm, And I said, but I've seen you do this before. But I said, well done. You psyched them out of another purchase again. And I've seen him do that a few times, But there's such a psychology behind it. And I think as an auctioneer, you get to understand and appreciate that because you see it all the time.
Yep.
But I think a lot of the market might think that it's not a thing. It's definitely a thing.
And I think that's probably a big tip for first home buyers. Like, yes, auctions, yes, they can be scary. Just make sure you have a good chat to your finance guy or your team, and just be confident about where you're bidding, because that can obviously go a long way, right? Now, we obviously just touched on it before. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap it anyway. But obviously, we just spoke about Matt before, but like buyer's agents, particularly now, I feel like I'm just seeing them not pop up everywhere, but I'm just noticing we're doing more and more deals with buyer's agents on a regular basis. How big of an impact do you think they're starting to have in the current real estate market? Are you finding you're doing more and more deals with buyer's agents than kind of you ever had before?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The impact that they started to make was just after COVID. When people were wanting to buy here, couldn't be here, and the whole incentive then to get a buyer's agent was to have a man on the ground because they couldn't be here, right? But then that was the infancy of buyer's agents on the Gold Coast. I think before then there was literally like one around for forever, and it's grown since then. And now they don't necessarily engage them now because they can't be here, but I think COVID helped the market on the Gold Coast really appreciate what a buyer's agent can do for you.
Yeah.
I love doing deals with buyer's agents. It makes our job easier. There's a higher level of trust between the buyer's agent and the buyer than there will be between the selling agent and the buyer.
Yeah.
So why not honor the strongest link in terms of the negotiation,
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge is for people looking to buy is the cost.
Yep.
Similar to a seller saying, well, I got to pay you 50 grand to sell my house. Maybe I can do it myself.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really hard for buyer's agents to actually try and sign up a client because a lot of buyers really love the journey of trying to find our house, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a first home buyer, the opens and all of that. And I think what I find is when a buyer's been looking for 6, 12 months and they've missed out on 2 and 3, they start losing the love for the process of buying a property.
Yeah.
At the start, it's fun.
Yeah.
But if you don't snag something pretty quickly, you get pretty burnt out. And I think it's at that point where buyers think, maybe we need help here. Maybe it is worth paying a buyer's agent, whatever it is, 1-2%.
And so just on that really quickly, obviously with a lot of buyer's agents, they also get the opportunity to transact on off-market purchases as well. And I've noticed, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but you guys have been doing a bit of that, a few sales off-market as well.
Yeah.
What do you reckon the driver of that has been? Or your ones in particular, are you finding?
I think you'll notice that the key trends when listings are tight, selling agents become a little bit more creative in getting deals. Although although there's less listings on the market, I'll take you through my mindset, right? Let's say, for example, I'm not meeting my listing quota. I start thinking, okay, I might not have the listings, but that's also going to affect my sales target or quota for the month.
Yep.
So if I don't have the listings to get the sales, sometimes I think I need to generate a sale. But all the people I'm speaking to at the moment are 3-6 months away from actually selling.
Yeah.
Which then gets you into creative mode. And you think, how can I create an opportunity out of nothing here?
Yeah.
And that's when agents will start matching buyers and start saying to sellers, well, look, I know you're 3 months away. I know you still got to finish this and this. What if I could get you a buyer that gives you the right price with the right settlement period, and they say to you, stop everything that you're doing, we'll give you the money now and we'll finish the work.
Yep.
A lot of the times those sellers will say, great, we'll do it. We sell 8% of our properties before market.
Well, yeah, okay.
It's not a huge amount, but we do roughly 70 sales a year. And over time, that's a lot of properties that most other buyers never got exposed to or had the opportunity to see.
light bulb moment just gone off in my head. So this, for any people looking to buy out there, this is the importance of being, you don't need to be so guarded with real estate agents. The more transparent and the more that a real estate agent knows about you, just the better it can potentially be. So what you've just said there exactly is kind of like, if you go to Billy, or if I go to Billy, and I go, mate, I've got 1.5 to spend. I can see there's not a lot on the market at the moment. I'm looking for a 3-bed, 2-bath in Currumbin Waters, Elanora, whatever surrounding suburbs. I think there's just a real benefit in going to those agents in those certain locations that you might be looking at, and maybe there's not something there for you right now, but you guys have that little book sitting there going, okay, well, I've got this that might be coming to market. And I think some people think that almost like the real estate agent's the enemy, right? Like you can't tell them too much and all that kind of stuff. But obviously with what you've just said, I just think it'd be silly not to almost reach out to go, hey, Billy, this is kind of what I've got.
I'll make a recommendation on that because the best way to get into an off-market property is unarguably through a buyer's agent, right?
Yep.
But let's say you don't have a buyer's agent. There seems to be a trend of buyers that come to me, and I'm sure they do with every other agent, and they say, can you please match me up with whatever you've got that's off market, right? And you'll get an email saying, please add me to the list. We want to know, what have you got off market? Or they'll call you and they say, what have you got coming up and all that? And I think to myself, what about what I've already got on the market? Instead of asking me what I've got off market, which I don't really want to tell you because one, I don't necessarily know you. I don't know you. I haven't qualified you yet. I don't know you. Have you even missed out on another property? So there seems to be this trend of buyers asking for off markets.
Yeah.
Where I think to myself, let's talk about what I've got that's actually ready and available, where my seller's on the market, they're motivated to sell. If none of that suits, tell me about what have you missed out?
Yeah.
Have you missed out on and tell me the property, or are you bidding on something else? Tell me, because if you're actively going to chase one and I've got something similar to that, then it's worth me matching you up.
Yeah.
But going to an agent directly saying, hey, what have you got off market? I feel like buyers agents get access to all of our pre and off market stuff because of the relationships we have with them.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a buyer without a buyer's agent, you need to have a relationship with an agent to get through the off market stuff.
Yeah.
And the best way you can do that is by actually going to the opens or trying to buy some of their properties that are already on the market.
Yeah.
The best buyer for me is someone who's just missed out on a listing that I've just sold to someone else. That underbidder is worth more to me than a buyer's agent's buyer. They're absolute gold to me. And if they've missed out on this, I know exactly what they're looking for. And all I have to do is match them up with the most identical property. And there's an easy deal to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I think with the other thing with buyers agents, quite often that they're putting their briefs out there as well, right? Like they'll have 10 clients, I've got this range, looking in these areas. So, and obviously the relationship, right? So, no, it's really interesting. I'm interested to see how much further that goes. I don't actually know the numbers. I'd love to know what the population, like the percentage of people that are using buyers agents these days. I think that number's just going to continue to climb. So. Yeah. Mate, that is it for today. I know that there's going to be a ton of value out there for everyone that's listening. Mate, I appreciate you coming on the potty again, and mate, wishing you and the team nothing but the best.
Thank you, mate. Same
Thanks,
to you guys.
mate. Love it.